Thank you.
I've decided to appear before you today to address the issue of the Federal Reserve System and its practices in monetary policy. Despite the word federal in its title, the Federal Reserve is not part of the United States government. It is a collection of private corporations owned by its member banks, which are owned by private stockholders. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act on December 23, 1913, while most congressmen were already home for Christmas and the average American's attention was surely elsewhere. The Federal Reserve System today is made up of 12 Federal Reserve banks, each serving a section of the country, but dominated by the New York Federal Reserve Bank. Through the Federal Reserve Act, Congress has forfeited its constitutional obligation to coin money and regulate the value thereof. To any intelligent person in the field of economics, the concept of a central bank is the antithesis to true free market capitalism, yet this observation is rarely considered on the corporate news. Upon the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, President Wilson is quoted as saying, quote, "I have unwittingly ruined my country," end quote. This sentiment is echoed by Louis McFadden, chairman of the House Banking Committee on June 10, 1932. Quote, "Mr. Chairman, we have in this country one of the most corrupt institutions the world has ever known. The depredations and the iniquities of the Federal Reserve boards and banks acting together have cost this country enough money to pay the national debt several times over. This evil institution has impoverished and ruined the people of the United States, has bankrupted itself, and has practically bankrupted our government. It has done this through the maladministration of the law by which the Federal Reserve Board and through the corrupt practices of the money vultures who control it," end quote. One of the strongest and most outspoken critics of the central bank was founding father Thomas Jefferson, who stated, and I quote, "I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and the issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs," end quote. John Adams echoed this by stating in 1811, quote, "Our banking system I have ever abhorred, I continue to abhor, and I shall die abhorring. Every bank of discount, every bank by which interest is to be paid for profit of any kind, be by the lender, is downright corruption. It is taxation for the public for the benefit and profit of individuals," end quote. The late Senator Barry Goldwater stated that, quote, "Most Americans have no real understanding of the operation of the international money lenders. The banksters want it that way. We recognize in a hazy sort of way that the Rothschilds and the Warburgs of Europe and the houses of J.P. Morgan, Kuhn, Loeb and Company, Schiff, Lehman, and Rockefeller possess and control vast wealth. How they acquire this vast financial power and employ it is a mystery to most of us," end quote. One person that this was not a mystery to was Henry Ford, who was quoted as saying, and I quote, "It is well enough that the people of this nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning," end quote. It should be common knowledge that a Federal Reserve note is not intrinsically valuable. The gold standard has been eliminated, and the only thing giving value to our fiat paper currency is ignorance, faith, and of course military prowess. Former chairman of the Fed, Alan Greenspan, understood this as he wrote in his book, Gold and Economic Freedom, and I quote, "In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. If there were, the government would have to make its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves. This is the shabby secret of the welfare state as tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the hidden confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as the protector of property rights," end quote. That is right, gold was illegal in the so-called land of the free. Nebraskan William Jennings Bryan was also a critic of the Fed, stating in the November 1923 issue of Hearst magazine, and I quote, "The Federal Reserve Bank that should have been the farmer's greatest protection has become his greatest foe," end quote. Congressman Charles Lindbergh Sr. told Congress one day before the Federal Reserve Act was passed, and I quote, "The worst legislative crime of the ages is perpetrated by this banking bill. The banks that have been granted the special privilege of distributing the money, and they charge as much as they wish. This is the strangest, most dangerous advantage ever placed in the hands of a special privileged class by any government that ever existed. The system is private. There should be no legal tender other than that which is issued by the government. The people are the government. Therefore, the government should, as the Constitution provides, regulate the value of money," end quote. Congressman Lindbergh was closely echoing former President Abraham Lincoln, who stated, quote, "The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. By adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be the master and will become the servant of humanity," end quote. With this said, I would like to challenge, on behalf of the American people, the IRS and Congress to show in public forum the statute that allows a direct, unapportioned tax on the labor and wages of the American people. regardless of the fact that on August 31st, 2005, federal judge Emmett Sullivan ruled that the government does not have to answer the American people's question, even though it is guaranteed by the First Amendment. Our deficit is currently over $1 trillion. Our national debt as of today is $11 trillion, $618,161,749,129.49. It has increased at an average of $3.91 billion per day since September 2007. Each citizen's share of the national debt is roughly $38,000 each. Anyone concerned with the information presented today should research Congressman Ron Paul's bills aimed at auditing and abolishing the Federal Reserve, H.R. 1207 and H.R. 2755. I will conclude with a quote from Thomas Jefferson that is as relevant today as it was the day he said it, and I quote, "If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered." End quote. Barack Obama is not change. He has loaded his cabinet with members of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, and Trilateral Commission. He is related to at least 6 U.S. presidents, Vice President Dick Cheney, and Winston Churchill. If this is change we can believe in, then I am crazy in an insane world. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak?
My name is Lucas Peterson, L-U-C-A-S-P-E-T-E-R-S-O-N. I currently reside in Councilman Spott's district, and I do not come tonight before with any specific grievance of the federal government or the city council. So, but if you give a man a microphone, I might as well speak, so if the council will. Lately, I've been very disappointed with the way that the state of Nebraska has been run. And specifically, my grievance is towards Governor Heineman and his assumed control of everything legislatively, even down to the business, and even through rules